But I really want to talk about parent anxiety today. And it's a
Okay.
really, I mentioned about a touchy subject because parents get defensive. They get guilty. They feel guilty.
Mhm.
They feel like, what did I do to create this?
Mhm.
Right. So we're not trying, obviously, to shame anyone in this. But the
Mhm.
truth is, apples don't fall far from the tree.
Right.
And you talk a lot about it.
Yeah, and we are social creatures. So the
Yep.
way that I say to parents, look, if your child is bilingual because in your home you speak English and Portuguese, the reason that they speak English and Portuguese is because you speak English and Portuguese. And
Exactly.
so the language of emotional management, the language of how you perceive the world, the language of how you celebrate holidays, the language of, the how you fold your laundry, how you load the dishwasher, how you hold your fork, all of those things are taught. And so there's no reason to think that suddenly we're going to not have that influence when we're talking about emotional management, when we're talking about stepping into the world, when we're talking about what you're supposed to be afraid of and what you're not supposed to be afraid of. Because we are social creatures, that's just the way it is. And there's no shame, there's no blame. That's just a fact.
Absolutely. And as you know, selective mutism, people focus on kids not speaking, but selective mutism is a social communication anxiety
Mm-hmm.
disorder. And that's
Mm-hmm.
honestly the basis for my work and my research. And that there's a very strong percentage, over 39% of families, when we did a family history study, have anxiety, the genetic component. But as you talk about, there's the genetics, and they present with a very social anxiety, generalized anxiety, mainly
Mm-hmm.
social anxiety presentation. But then there's the ones that don't have that. So the anxiety is stemming from other reasons, the whys, as
Mm-hmm.
I call of SM.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to talk to you about that kind of genetic that they've inherited it, but they've also learned it, as you say, generational anxiety, right?
Mm-hmm.
And their own experiences that have kind of curbed their way.
Yeah. So we know that when we're talking about anxiety, we know that there's a genetic push because we know that temperament has a lot to do with this. And I often say that, as we all know, if you've been hanging out with human beings for a while, some kids come out like chihuahuas and some kids come out like golden retrievers, right? I mean, it's just different. And when we've got this combination of nature and nurture, so if you have a temperament, that means that it's harder for you to be in the world. You're not as extroverted. It's really hard for you to model that for your kids. There's really good research. There was one great study that looked at teenagers with anxiety. And what it showed in the study, and it said, and I quote, no significant evidence of genetic transmission, but hugely based on modeling, right? So that's one study. There's great work done by this woman named Golda Ginsburg,
Yes.
where she looked at families where one or two of the parents were anxious. The kids were not yet showing indications of anxiety, but we could predict because that's the way the statistics go. So she did some preventative work with these parents. And she said, so here are the things that we know become risk factors. The way you talk about your own fears, whether or not you promote flexibility or rigidity in your family, all of these risk factors. And when she gave the parents the information about this, when the kids came back a year later, 0% of these kids had developed anxiety over that year. So there are concrete things that parents, like I say to parents all the time, I'm not blaming you. I feel like this is enormously useful information that I want parents to have because we want to think preventatively. This We in the United States are not so great at prevention.
Yeah.
I don't know. People will say we should treat mental health like physical health, and I'm like, really? That's going to be the model? Because we're not so great at prevention with physical health
Right.
either. But parents, I feel like we have to empower parents, just like you do in your trainings, because parents say, I'm sure they say to you, they say to me all the time, just tell us what to do. Just
Absolutely.
tell us what to do. We need to know the do's and the don'ts. You understand this. They say, you get this. You deal with this. Tell us what to do. And I think that's incredibly helpful for parents.
No, for sure. It absolutely is.